Let's explore autistic history and the Autism Wars. This is part 100. We're at part 100 of a series. Alright, so I guess this brings me to the point that we need to talk more about autism researcher, parent of an autistic, and founder of Autism Research Institute and Defeat Autism Now, Bernard Rimland. Yeah, it's always fun with these guys. Oh goodness. So, Bernard Rimland. Alright, so Bernard Rimland goes way back to the 60s and 70s in those first Autism Wars, right? Against the popular refrigerator mother's myth that came around and was introduced by Leo Kanner, but it was Bruno Bettelheim who made it really popularized. And it was really harmful to families and autistics. It was very harmful. So they were very successful in getting that booted out. But now, the rest of Rimland's history does not do well for us autistics. This is where it gets difficult again. And before we think the theories and myth system created by Bernard Rimland or brought about and made popular by, in help large part of Bernard Rimland and his autism organizations, Autism Research Institute and Defeat Autism Now, that organization, they are greatly affecting us today, even though they were booted out of consideration for legislation in 06 or 07, and you hear about this uproar in that era, and we'll talk about it going forward, but this is where the Autism Speaks founding family breaks up, and you have Katie Wright leaving and going off to Generation Rescue. And Generation Rescue is very much this front in the autism community that swears mercury and other things cause their child to be autistic. And so that explodes even bigger later with talk shows and things, and we will talk about that, but all that keeps going. And now we have the Children's Health Defense or something like that, and that's where all these people are at now, and they've created the researchers and scientists and whatever is evolved all the way now, and it's over here, and this community is supporting RFK Jr. for his presidential run. That's where we're at, history to now, but there's a lot that happens in between. And unfortunately, these folks really attach themselves to very legitimate movements in conservation and environment and everything else. And that's what's really frustrating, is where do these guys begin and end? And they're attaching themselves to a real movement and muddying the waters for everybody if they don't understand the history here or how it originated. It's profoundly frustrating and worrisome. But let's talk about Bernard Rimland for now. Alright, I'm going to share with you an overview of Bernard Rimland written after his death and published November 26, 2006, and it was by Thomas H. Maugh the second. I can't even begin to pronounce that name. I don't know how, sorry. And this is by a LA Times staff writer. Now, mind you, this is 2006, and this is the neurotypical world and what they know of Rimland. We will get into the other side of this and what we know in the autistic community and what was happening here as well after this. But let's first see what the world thought of him in 2006. All right, states here, Bernard Rimland, the San Diego research psychologist widely considered the father of modern autism research, died Tuesday at a care facility in El Cajon after a prolonged battle against prostate cancer. He was 78. Rimland's 1964 book, Infantile Autism, a Syndrome and Its Implications for a Neural Theory of Behavior, demolished the generally held view that autism was the psychological byproduct of a refrigerator mother's cold, unfeeling women who forced their children to withdraw into a protective shell of indifference. He concluded instead that the disorder, characterized by poor language skills and an inability to handle social relations, was the result of a fundamental biochemical defect underlain, perhaps by defective genes, but ultimately triggered by environmental assaults. Rimland was among the first to conclude that the United States was undergoing an epidemic of autism, one that increased the incidence of the disorder from a rare one case in several thousand births to the current government accepted rate of 1 in every 175 children. He concluded that mercury in vaccines was the primary culprit in this increase and led a vociferous campaign among parents to have the heavy metal used to kill contaminating bacteria removed from the vaccines. The campaign had only limited success, in part because government and medical authorities disagreed with his conclusion. Rimland was also a forceful advocate for intensive behavioral therapy for autistic children, a therapy that many claim has restored their children to normality. Along the way, he founded the Autism Society of America, the largest parent-based autism organization in the country, with more than 100,000 members and supporters and 200 local chapters. Quote, I consider Dr. Rimland the grand godfather of the movement for the understanding of the biological treatment of autism, Dr. Jacqueline McCandless wrote in her book Children with Starving Brains, a medical treatment guide for autism spectrum disorder. Added Lee Grossman, president and chief executive officer of the Autism Society. No one has done more for autism than our founder, Bernie, and all in the autism community have been profoundly touched and have benefited through his decades of passion and dedication to our cause. Now, this was not the career path he had planned, it states. Bernard Rimland was born November 15th, 1928 in Cleveland. The family moved to San Diego when he was 12 so his father could take a wartime metalworking job with Convair. He immediately fell in love with the city. Cleveland had been muggy and dirty, he recalled in an interview. I got here and said, this is heaven. I'm never leaving. He earned an undergraduate degree and a master's in psychology at San Diego State University before leaving the state briefly to obtain a doctorate at Pennsylvania State University. He married Gloria Bell Alf, the sister of a childhood friend, in 1951, 2 years before receiving his doctoral degree. After his graduation, the couple returned to San Diego, where he took a position with the Personal Measurement Research Department at Point Loma Naval Station. Now it states here their life changed dramatically with the birth of their son Mark in 1956. So I am going to wrap this video up here and pick back up in the next video on this article that was written upon the death of, yes, next step.